I am very happy to announce our next speaker from the farm. Please welcome Geoff Gates.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces here. I see some of my longtime collaborators here. I have Chloe, I have Donna, and Ann here. It's great to be here. Get right into it, all right? Thank you. I was a volunteer at Marjorie Can Rawlings Park for 4 years, I think it was, and ranger for 7. So these are 11 years, I shouldn't say 11 years a slave, 11 years of my experiences. And I'd like to say that, I'd like to be able to say that it was my dream to be a park ranger at Marjorie Can Rawlings. It was something totally unexpected, totally accidental, acts of fate along the way. And Sheila Holloway, some of you may know, she grew up right alongside what had been Marjorie's place. She was off and on throughout much of her adult life working there. And I called her our ambassador to the other world, to the supernatural. She said she was the one and only person I ever met there. She said it's a very matter-of-fact way how she heard voices and laughing, clinking of glasses. And when I told her, I said, I don't know how I ended up here. It was against my will. Something pulled me in here. And she said, I know exactly what happened. Marjorie wanted you here. Marjorie chose you. That's the way it was for me. That's the way it is for a lot of us. And we aren't really working for Parks Department. We're working for Marjorie. So if you want to look at it that way, and I guess maybe I do look at it that way. So anyway, Marjorie wanted us all to be there. As I said, it was totally unexpected. I grew up on a farm. I said pieces of my life came together there. I grew up on a farm very similar to the one that she has there. And when I reached a certain age, my neighbor said, you just can't keep you on the farm, down on the farm, can they, Geoff? I started running away, running away from the farm, running away from college. In those days, it was easy to run away because bus tickets were really cheap. And if you didn't have enough money to get to where you're going, you just get off the bus and put out your thumb. And so there was New Orleans and San Francisco and Mexico and Guatemala. And finally, I landed on the enchanted island of Manhattan. And if you land in Manhattan and you need to do something and you're full of sea literature and you've got a degree in history, where else do you go but South Street Seaport Museum? They always had ads in the Village Voice. And so I went to the fly-by-night in those days, South Street Seaport Museum. So I started out as a part-time tour guide there. And it was, in those days, a little shaky. We all rushed to the bank to see who could cash their check first, because sometimes they bounced. Sometimes the museum president would pull out his wallet and pay you in cash out of his own wallet. That's the kind of place it was. It was 11 blocks of national landmark buildings, as they said in the literature, awaiting restoration. Sometimes no roofs, sometimes boarded up fronts held up by 2x4s. That was South Street Seaport Museum in those days. And I don't know how, I was trying for the sake of this talk to remember how I got promoted from a part-time tour guide to a full-time tour guide and then chief of staff of the education department, which was 80% of the staff. I have no idea how that happened. It was the most thankless job in the world. I think the museum president never could remember his name, my name, no matter how many times I met him. And I got backhanded by calling him King. He looked like Henry VIII with a tweed jacket on. And I think he kind of liked that. Maybe that's how I got my promotion. I don't know. Anyway, it was bedlam. It was madness. It was tours through what they called the historic district. It was ship tours. It was 2 replica paddle wheelers going out every hour with a guide on board, giving a spiel, a talk about the history of New York Harbor. And from 10 o'clock on, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, we had 200 school children every hour to sort up. That was my job, as well as training and evaluations and all that, 25, 30 people. And so it was an amazing job, which led to, years later at Marjorie Rawlings, I would have a day where I would have 2 school groups and then maybe 4 tours going at the same time, and then I've got a bus tour coming in, and after lunch I got another bus tour coming in, and I'm setting up for a special event the next day, and I said, you know where I got the ability to handle all this? In that, in that trial by fire at South Street Seaport Museum. So, South Street Seaport Museum in those days was a museum I call a museum of the mind. We would talk about, we would tell our people coming in, our visitors, to use their imagination, imagine ship chandleries and brothels and boarding houses where you see nothing but boarded up buildings now and a line of ships' bows and masts for as far as the eye can see. It was all a museum, mostly a museum of the mind, except for one thing, and that was the Fulton Fish Market. The Fulton Fish Market was a true relic, very much alive and well in those days. The second biggest fish market in the world, and we did tours of that too. I was one of the 2 tour guides that would go through the extraordinarily difficult thing. Starts at 10 o'clock in the night, goes until about 6 or 7 in the morning. We took the tour at 5, and you have to imagine slop on the floor, at least 120 species of something or other, turtles and shellfish, giant sharks, and tuna hanging from the rafters. Some of our people who paid a lot of money for the tour would split after 5 minutes. The stench and the sounds and all of it. But I thought I should ask this question. When I went into the Fulton Fish Market, I was crossing Marjorie Rawlings' path for the first time. Anybody know the famous story from the Fulton Fish Market? No? See, I was asking if Ann McCutcheon was here. No, you don't?
She's not here this year, no.
I know. Nobody knows this story. Maxwell Perkins and Thomas Wolfe, Marjorie Rawlings, getting very drunk in Greenwich Village, and proceeding so until it got to the Fulton Fish Market. And Thomas Wolfe is getting wilder and wilder, and he gets into the Fulton Fish Market, and he's bellowing, and I think she describes him picking up maybe an octopus, like it's the skull of York, ravens. Very famous scene for the life of Marjorie Rawlings.
Flo, do you know it?
It rings a bell, but it was in Ann's book. I don't know where she got that. But.
No, it's from her own letters,
Yeah.
and it is. I think the only one and only meeting with Thomas Wolfe. Mm-hmm. And they proceeded to get very drunk, and she ends up at.
Not in Asheville?
What's that?
Didn't she meet him in Asheville?
No, that's
Okay.
Fitzgerald.
No, but like Thomas Wolfe's home.
Oh no, she might have. Yeah. Anyway, so that is the one and only real part of the South Street Seaport was the Fulton Fish Market, and I think anybody know? I just throw this out too. There's a famous scene with Marjorie Rawlings. Also, the second most famous line from The Godfather comes from the Fulton Fish Market. What other movie other than The Godfather? The line is what? He sleeps with the fishes. And Mario Puzo, God, that's a true story. Apparently, some of the fishmongers or the fish companies or the truckers had connections to real-life versions of the Corleones and the Brazzinis, and it was the place to dispose when the wise guy got whacked. What a convenient place to get rid of him. You've got all these hand trucks and all these bundles coming in and up on trucks, and so they would go straight out the door into the East River, where they would rest in peace with the fishes while it was cold enough. But when the weather warmed up, things begin to percolate, gases begin to form, and on 1 or 2 magic days, we would have floater day. They would rise up. And then, I had 4. One day, we had a floater morning action from 10 to 1. I had 4 come up. It's part of my job. And I knew before I got the call, I could hear the screaming on the boat, because I had about 100 kids on the Peking, the biggest of the sailing ships. And the kids just loved it, of course. He's a real life Freddy Krueger. So I said, floater day was one of the many reasons why I left South Street Seaport. And I turned in my resignation, and I was getting away from the museum business for good. But they pulled me back. And even before, somehow somebody in the Parks Department, she actually turned out to be a classmate of mine at Syracuse University. She came down looking for me, and you always know you're in trouble when they're looking for you. They're afraid you won't show up for your interview. She left her card, I went up and we talked about it, and she had this amazing challenge, she said, for me. Did anybody know here, that there still is a Dutch farmhouse on the northern end of Manhattan, on Broadway? She said, Geoff, you're going to get a chance to work on Broadway. Well, it's not that Broadway. Not the Broadway you think of. And she said, you've got to see it. You won't believe it. Sure enough, I didn't believe it. There's a hill above Broadway. And up on top of the hill, this house is pretty much like the Rawlings house, really, with a wooden shingle roof and this little old Dutch farmhouse from 1789, built just after the Revolution. Who knew there was still a farmhouse standing on the island of Manhattan? It's one and only. It had been, and go ahead and take a look. I said, what isn't wrong with this place? This is a museum. Officially, it's a museum. Officially, it's a park. But it has a visitation of, I think they said the low 2 figures per month. Bare light bulbs and ceilings sagging. And what isn't wrong with this place? And I can be executive director of this place. The big problem with South Street Seaport was volume, chaos. The big problem up here is we're starting a museum basically from scratch. We're going to start an education program, and I had very little time. They're about to close it. They said, if you can't get the visitation up here in about 6 months, they're going to close it. I mean, they're going to lay you off, you're done. So we began. Very luckily, this is part of the deal. Andy Warhol gave me a check for $30,000, no strings attached. And it's amazing what you could do in a short amount of time. In those days, 30 years ago, $30,000. So we had an education program, 4th grade up and running in about 6 months. We started a grand series of entertainments. Later on, I would tell the ranger who I took her place to carry at Marjorie Rawlings. She said, what should I do here? I said, you should do just what I did at Dykeman House. You throw whatever you can against the wall and see what sticks. We have this place is this tiny little farmhouse, and surrounded by tenements, literally in the shadow of the tenement buildings, and about 3/4 of an acre. And we have Irish, we have old Irish and old Jewish community there. We have a brand new Dominican community pouring in there. It's pouring in. What is called euphemistically a troubled neighborhood. And so we just gave it all. We had step dancing for the Irish. We had salsa for the Dominicans, attracted something like 500 or 600 people. And we had Yiddish tap dancing, all in one day, actually, I did that. And there was nothing I wouldn't try, and most of it worked to some extent, some of it worked brilliantly. We got the place up and running, and I said, I got the patient revived and standing on his feet, and I'm getting out of here before he falls flat on his face. So that was the end of I thought it was the end of my tour of duty in historic houses and museums, but little did I know. So, the most commonly asked question when I was at Marjorie Rawlings was, how did you get to Florida? And I said, I came to Florida because of University of Florida Graduate School. And they assumed, because I'm talking about Marjorie Rawlings and literature, I was in the literary program at the University of Florida. I said, no, I was in tropical agriculture. And nothing whatsoever to do with Marjorie Rawlings. My life took a totally different turn. But what brought me to Cross Creek first was, well, actually, when I first got to Florida, first thing, and I should have known, I was nibbling on the bait. The first thing I did in my first week in Florida was I bought first edition of Marjorie Rawlings, and I bought a kayak. And that really was the beginning. The first place I launched my kayak was the River Styx at Cross Creek. And I'll never forget launching my kayak because there's a little boy up on the bridge. And he says to me, I took the story back to the University of Florida. He says to me, my dad want to know what you call a boya. And I looked up at him and I said, son, I don't know what you just said to me. And he said, my daddy want to know what you call that boat of yours. And I said, okay, your daddy wants me to know what I call this boat of mine. It's called a kayak. And he yells back, Dad, he calls it a kayak. He calls it a kayak. And I went back to the University of Florida. I said, boy, I need a translator out there. I worked, but then I worked a year in Guatemala trying to translate from Mayan to Spanish. So anyway, Cross Creek, I still need a translator. But I went out to Cross Creek to write, just like Marjorie did. I wanted to get away from Gainesville. I was writing a thesis first, and then I was writing a dissertation that never got finished for various reasons. And finally, I was writing a book about a place you never heard of in Guatemala, pioneer villages in the rainforest, what had been a rainforest, and how the war swept over them. It's Guatemalan version of Gone with the Wind, had nothing to do with Cross Creek. But that's what I came out to do. And a friend of mine had just pure speculation about this wreck of a cracker house on the edge of Rawlings Park. And it was worse, much worse than Margie describes her own house at Cross Creek. The house leaked like a sieve whenever it rained, the roof leaked like a sieve, and the floors were collapsing. The termites were eating up the mantle in the living room, slowly but surely disintegrating as I watched. But I could have it whenever I wanted it, come and go as I pleased. And it was a wonderful thing. And Margie was my next door neighbor. I used to tell people she's the perfect next door neighbor because she's dead. I wish I had some next door neighbors like that today. But I was curious about my next door neighbor. So I'd already read Cross Creek, so I read the Max and Margie letters. And I bought the cookbook at the store that was there then. I started cooking like Margie Rawlings, and slowly but surely I'm being pulled in. And I think I know who it was, put an invitation to a Christmas party in my mailbox. And anyway, I headed out, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Lane Spencer, who was the head of the Friends at that point, remember Lane was amazing, Lane, yes. She was having a Christmas party. And one of the volunteers who's been there forever, she asked me a while ago, do you remember meeting me, Geoff? I said, no, I honestly don't. You've been around forever. And she said, well, I remember you. I'll never forget meeting you because I saw you coming in the distance, and up ahead of you were your two beautiful honey hounds trotting ahead of you. And that's what got me my first job as a volunteer at Margie Rawlings. Carrie Todd, who was the best thing that ever happened to Margie Rawlings Park, had just become a ranger, and she saw those two honey hounds, and she said, what can they hunt? And I said, they can hunt anything, from fox to coon to bear. They will hunt it, and what needs to be done. And she said, we've got this bobcat jumping the fences, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, taking out a chicken. Could you run those hounds through the park twice a day? So that was my job, my first job. Totally illegal in a state park. Don't check on this. But I was running hounds. And we took care of a lot of armadillos and a couple of coons, only once. And hound dogs, it's funny, their yodel changes with the prey. And only once did they get on that cat. And you will never forget the sound. I never heard them on a cat before. This long, high-pitched howl, and off they went. And as fate would have it, we had a great big school group. I was a guide then. A great big school group in the tenant house where they caught it. And the guide said, you should have seen the look in their eyes. They're terrified. One of them says, are they hunting slaves? And I said, I certainly hope we don't hunt slaves here. One and only time we ever got on the cat. So, anyway, I had this house, this record house, and I was actually seriously writing for the first time in my life. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to sit down every morning and write. Very happy, and then the house I was living in was sold out from under me. I get 48 hours to go, and I called up my old friend at that point, Carrie Todd. I said, Carrie, can you help me out here? Do you have an opening over there? And she said, yes, we do. They have two RV sites. One was vacant, so I said, I got enough money for an RV, pulled in there, and I became officially a resident guide. I was so stupid. I had a meeting with Carrie, and I think Carrie was planning on negotiating. She said, you're going to be a tour guide. I said, there's other things. No, I think you should be a tour guide, which is obvious. And she said, could you do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I said, yes, I could. And she said, could you be on call for Thursday too? I said, well, yes, I could. So I'm really, really grateful that we weren't going to be homeless, the hound dogs and I. And if you ever done 4 days, because it ended up being 4 days of tours, 3 tours a day for 4 days in a row. On Sunday, you sit down and stare at the wall. So a lot of touring. So that's how I began. And shortly after that, this is the summer of 2017, Hurricane Irma's coming in, and you're looking at probably the last person you will ever see who spent a night of a hurricane in Marjorie Can Rawlings' house. And it's again, I'm telling you, but this is absolutely never happened today. A volunteer would never spend a night in a Parks Department facility, let alone in a storage house like that. We were looking at some serious stuff. The hurricane was supposed to come, Irma was supposed to come straight over us. We were supposed to have 110 mile sustained winds. And we had a stack of shutters down at the storage shed that had never been on the house before. No, it had hardly been looked at. Each one had been built, each window had been shutter designed for it. Never been put on before. This is a historic moment, the first time ever. Shutters are going to be put on Marjorie Rawlings' house. And I had Carrie, who was 8 months pregnant, and I had Sheila, who was about 100 pounds, and myself, and you go with the army you got. Somehow, for the first time ever, we got the shutters on. And I had nowhere to go. I told Carrie, I really, there's no shelter to take the dogs. I'm not going to leave them in the RV. And the guy who sold me the RV said, do not spend the hurricane in that RV. And she's like, oh, go to the house. So I fell asleep and I woke up. It was about 2 in the morning. I heard this howling wind outside the RV. And I turned on the radio and they said that hurricane is in Denellen, coming our way fast. And that was it. We bailed out of the RV and we got water up to our ankles. And the hound dogs are going crazy because hurricane's coming, everything's on the move. Rabbits and possum, they were going nuts. Got them onto the south porch. I got onto the south porch. And I was really excited because I'd read what Marjorie said about hurricanes. Amazing stuff, Cabbage palms go all the way down to the ground. They pop up again and go down. All this stuff. Well, the truth is, in the dark, we couldn't see a thing. All you can do is hear things out there. And every few minutes you hear the house itself, as she described it, not a sound from it, not even a creak. It's like a rock. That house was built to survive anything. But outside, we hear a crash from time to time, and a lot of stuff's coming down. And we were fine, though. Fine on the south porch until around 4 in the morning, and then the wind shifts, and all of a sudden it's like the bow of a boat crashing in the waves. One after another, absolutely crashing. There's the only place we can go is behind the dining room door. Small space where it's still dry. And otherwise, the water is pouring in. And then it stops. And dawn comes, and I go out and look, and there are trees all over the road. All around the grove, the trees are down. And I called up Valley Rivers, who was the manager at the time. And I called her once, and she didn't answer. I called again, she said, oh, I was asleep. I said, oh, that must be nice. I was the only one there. I'd been the only one there for almost 48 hours at that point. It must be nice to sleep. And I gave her the report, which she relayed to Tallahassee. And so you're looking at probably the last person who will ever be in Marjorie Rawlings' house during the hurricane.
Oh, that was good.
Carrie never came back from maternity leave, and Marjorie and Valley Rivers retired. And before Carrie left, I said she was the most vivacious. I think it's one of the best things that ever happened to that house. She brought so much life to it. Before she left, she said, because Terry and I talked a lot, well, especially while I was there as a volunteer. We were trapped in a summer afternoon, there were no visitors. We talked a lot about where the place was going, what might be done. And she really surprised me. She said, Geoff, I really hope you apply for my job. I even thought about it. And at the very last minute I did, and Scott Spaulding hired me. And this was the beginning of me for a golden age. I think Scott and I had the most perfect manager, the new manager. Scott had been in Parks Department for 35 years. He just been, what's it called, awarded Manager of the Year for the state of Florida. As he came in, took a major pay cut to take the job. And Scott and I had, I think, the most perfect working relationship. A lot of people didn't realize that Scott, a lot of people, everything you did at that point to change the place was controversial. And people would think about going to Scott to overrule me. I don't think what people realized was that every morning, Scott would come into my office and we would sit down and we'd talk about the dogs and the grandchildren and all that. We'd also talk about every little thing we were doing and going to do, and there was not one bit of light between the two of us, really. It was a perfect working relationship. And so we were off and running. First thing, we had a lot of ideas. First thing, we decided to, for years we'd had a birthday, there'd been a birthday party for Margie once. And ice cream was served, and cake was served. And I said, let's up the ante. Well, this was just about a month after the two of us took over. Let's up it a little bit. Let's do the famous mango ice cream. Everybody heard her description of the mango ice cream?
Ashley,
Oh, the microphone off.
did you touch the button?
Oh, that's it? Am I on?
There
Yeah,
you go.
I hit the button.
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Very discreet. Blends in perfectly. Yeah. So, everybody knows the description of the mango ice cream. Takes you to a state of ecstasy. That blending of that perfect cream from Dora and the mangoes together creates a ice cream so superb, it leaves you in a state of ecstasy or indigestion. And so we began decided we were going to make mango ice cream for the masses. I was just talking to some people back there. We were so stupid then. We were going to do it just as Marjorie had done it in her kitchen. It's August. We were straining it as she would have done it. I'm cooking the custard on a hot plate. We had no idea how much mango ice cream we were going to need. That was just the first year. Over the years, I have no idea how many gallons and gallons of mango ice cream we've made for the birthday party. The birthday party with the live music and the cake has become an institution there. I don't think it's ever going to go away, right, Ann? Till you stop funding it.
Refined it over the years.
We've greatly refined it, yes. We do it all in air conditioning.
We do it in cups rather than dipping up and melting all over it.
And we throw all the pulp in a ninja and hit a button. We've refined it in many ways, yes. I think we reached our max at 150 servings. We could probably serve a lot more.
And then we had to use the auxiliary ice cream that we always buy.
Yes.
Yeah.
One year, was it 2 years ago, we were out of everything. The auxiliary was gone, the mango was gone, everything's gone.
We had some cookies that the church ladies brought over, and that's
Yeah.
what we served for the rest of the day.
Now, Ann, I got you on stage here. Do you remember how the Christmas open house came to be?
She might be.
600 or so that one.
No, I remember where the idea came from.
I'm thinking it.
Me?
But before that, we had an evening event.
Yeah.
In the fall, several years before.
Yeah.
And that was so popular.
Mhm.
You could not go to the park in the evening.
Mhm.
And it's magical in the evening because you.
More magical when you have fires everywhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and they did.
But no, it was my first friends meeting actually with Scott, and I said we need to do some really nice community events, and you asked such as, and off the top of my head, based somewhat on things things I did at the Dykeman House, because we did candlelight concerts there, but I just described what we would do, and it came mostly from Marjorie Rawlings, because I think the most beautiful passage in Cross Creek is the passage about the firing of the grove. And the light, the reflection of the fire on the leaves, and the oranges, the ripe oranges, and the house. And I said, I added that to the idea of candles and the house decorated entirely in apples and mango and magnolia and greens and candles throughout the house, and a roaring fire in the fireplace, and the music, and beautiful food, Christmas food, and the grove fired by bonfires. And what could go wrong with that, right? Fire, fire, more fire? And I thought we'd get back, and Scott would say, what a stupid idea. Scott loved it, and so we went forward with it. And I had the most amazing team of volunteers. Tom T. Gardner brought his kids in, and they became the fire crew. We had 6 magnificent bonfires. And well, the thing is, we'd never done this before. We had no idea what we're getting into. It's a big night event. People wander around in the dark. What could go wrong? Day before, we realized, I don't know who came up with this wonderful idea. It might have been me. How are we going to light this place? And some said, tiki torches. So Scott's wife Gina went one direction, I went the other direction. We bought out Walmart in both directions, tiki torches, brought them back. The magic of tiki torches at the open house was born. And I heard, everything you did, I heard so many times, this is going to be a disaster. Nobody's going to come. There are 10, 12, 15 things to do that night. Nobody's going to show up here. And you know what they say about what success has 100 parents and failure has an orphan. I said, this is my idea. Wait and see, nobody's going to show up, and it's going to be an utter disaster, and I couldn't get over it. A few people came through the gate, and then a few more, and then a few more, and then a steady stream coming through the gate, and Sheila came up behind me and patted me on the back and said, Geoff, you did it. They're coming. 150 people we got that year. And it was Flo. We were so crazy. We didn't know what we were doing, running all over the place. And it was Flo, it was you, who sat me down on the bench. I'll never forget that. Sat me down on the bench on the south porch. Geoff, sit here a minute and look at this. Look up. And it was the scene from Cross Creek. Absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And we had one thing we'd forgotten, how we're going to get people out of here. It's pitch dark between the house and the parking lot. So we're walking, almost everybody got an escort out with a flashlight. And I couldn't get over it. One after another said, this was just stunning. I just can't believe it.
And those tiki torches were just like right at your hair level, right?
Oh, it was the whole thing. I called it a festival of fire. What could go wrong? There's fire everywhere. There's fire through the house. There's fire in the yard. There's fire everywhere. It is magnificent.
It was magnificent.
And so magnificent, I started getting phone calls in July the next year. People want to come to the Christmas open house. I had calls coming in from Palm Beach. I had calls coming in from Miami. I have 4 buses coming from the villages. And that's why I call this my own Frankenstein's monster. We had 600 people the next year. It was an absolute miracle. We fed them all, only because I brought the food out in stages. Everybody got something to eat. I don't know what. But I think it has established itself as, I think there'll always be a Christmas open house with some kind of fire in the yard. It's been greatly reduced by the fire marshal now. I retired, I literally retired before we did the fireless open house. But there's still a little fire, and I hope it worked out.
The cook stove still has.
Yeah, that's what we're reduced to. Before I did the open house, so the thing that I consider to be the most important event with the writing talks, the writers. And I said, the second book I read by Marjorie Rawlings and Max Perkins is the letters between the two of them. And you see in those letters her extraordinary passion for writing and writers, her compassion for writers. She wanted that house to be a place for writers, a place to promote writers. We've got to get writing programs going. And then once again, I was told immediately, nobody's going to drive out here to hear somebody stand up and read from a book. That's never going to happen. Nobody's going to show up. We had to get exactly the right candidate, and magically the right candidate came along. Her name was Elizabeth McCullough. She had this idea for a book 35 years before, Dreaming the Marsh. In between she started writing it, and then she got married, she had kids, she had a career as a lawyer. She never ever lost sight of finishing that book, and by God, she did. And she found a really good publisher, and she was about to launch this book. It was just like magic. She came to me. I was connected to her. And I said, you are going to be our first writer. And the publisher loved my press release. And Liz said that she'd had 3 press releases before mine. You know what? Yours is the best, and you know why? Because you actually read the book. I said, yes, I did. It always helps. And so that was the press release. Her publisher picked it up. I had my usual press contacts, but that went out far and wide to Orlando and St. Petersburg and Jacksonville. And I was really, really important to get the turnout. And I had no idea. I thought maybe it would bomb. My God, they kept coming in until I had this huge bank of people in front of the tenant house. Almost 100 people showed up for her. And I stepped down on stage on the porch to do the introduction. And I said, I'm being perfectly honest with you. It's the Day of the Dead, November 2nd. I said the veil, it's the day when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. And I said, I honestly can feel the joy of Marjorie Rawlings. This is what she wanted this writer and this place used for. And when Liz came up on stage, she hugged me and she said, Geoff, we did it. I said, no, Liz, you did it. It's all yours. Thunderous applause. And the writers' talks continue. It does continue. It was the best part of the job was dealing with the writers. Each and every one of them I had sort of a fleeting but wonderful friendship with as we put it all together. And they are not just talks. One thing we did for Liz and continue to do is not just a talk. It's meant to be sort of a literary cocktail party. We get wildflowers from the prairie and some nice little desserts and some nice drink. And it's meant for people who love writing and writers to talk and mingle, celebrate a writer and writing in general. And one thing we discovered that we never expected, they make a lot of money. People who show up for writers' talks want to buy books. Lots of books. The writers make money, the friends make money, win, win, win. So, my favorite program. I'm going to get out. I want to talk, I was going to talk about other things. We did many things there. I'm just going to skip over it. We could ask some questions if you want to in a minute or two. I want to talk specifically. A big part of being a ranger is visitors. That's what you're there for, really. And I want to talk a little bit about the extraordinary experiences. One of the experiences I had over the years, the most astonishing visitors that have come to the park. I say, well, every visitor in a way is astonishing. Visitors, I say, go from 0 to 10. 0 is somebody who saw a sign along the road and pulled in and followed the arrow. I have no idea who Marjorie Rawlings is. Sometimes you can bring a visitor, like in 40 or 50 minutes we have with them, you can bring a visitor up to Marjorie Rawlings, buying a book written by Marjorie Rawlings. Who knows where they're going to go, sometimes. Or sometimes they have no interest, but they're amazing people. You never know. So that's 0. And then there's 10. And I said, up around 10, maybe 11, are the people who are making pilgrimages. Those are the most fascinating people. Not just, sometimes just Marjorie Rawlings. I had one woman, I will never forget her. She was not in good health. She read every single scrap of things that Marjorie had written, and she was starting all over again. And we just take her. It was an amazing experience. I let her sit places. We just take her from room to room, and we sit, and she talks about her feelings, and what Marjorie wrote about this room. It's an amazing thing. So we have those. The other pilgrims, I think, are the ones that go to every writer's house. They've been to Margaret Mitchell's house in Atlanta. They've been to Thomas Wolfe's mother's place in Asheville. They've been to Hemingway's, of course. And they've been all across the Midwest and California. They've been to Jack London's house. They've been to, you just mentioned a place, Red Cloud, Willa Cather's house. And they talk about Willa Cather, sitting in Willa Cather's house. They talk about Laura Ingalls Wilder's house. They bring you in contact with the whole world of American writers. Those are some of my favorites. And then there are what I call the pieces of history that would walk through the gate. And by pieces of history, I mean people who brought us things we never knew about Marjorie Rawlings, people who actually experienced Marjorie Rawlings in some way. I was doing my usual spiel in front of the house. I was doing my usual spiel about the state of the house one day. Big crowd in the house. The roof had leaked and never been painted, and the garbage in the living room, garbage in the fireplace. And this older gentleman started heckling me. That's not true. That's not true. The roof didn't leak. There was no garbage in the fireplace. It was in perfect shape. I said, sir, who are you? Well, his name was Armstrong. He was the grandson of the man who sold it to the Rawlings. He knew because his mother told him exactly how it was. And he told me more remarkably, he said, it's in perfect shape. They always kept this place beautifully. There's no weeds in the ground. There's nothing. Nothing. It's all lines. All lines. It's called literary license. But more remarkably, he told me the whole story of moving what became the bedroom wing of the house, a tenant house, moving it in. His mother and his aunt were sharing a room with their brothers, and they were sick and tired of it. They wanted a room of their own, pestering their father, till finally he goes out and buys this old tenant house somewhere and hitches his oxen up to it and moves it. He tells me the whole story, which he got straight from his mother who saw it. And we had always said that when they moved it, it was just wide open space between the bedroom wing and the living room wing. I said, no, it wasn't. You didn't go out on the ground and come back up. No, there was a breezeway in there. No. The breezeway probably became the floor of the bathroom that she put in. So, yeah. So, you never know. You never know. The most amazing, truly amazing experience I ever had there. I was the gardener, among other things, summer gardener at least, and I was out slaving away in the garden. This is early on, probably my first year as ranger. And I'm covered in sweat, covered in dirt, and Donna Wright, who was our tour guide, my right-hand woman, she starts calling me, Geoff, there's somebody I think you need to come in here and talk to. And I came in, here's this wiry old man, very, very great shape, and he's with these two younger women who turned out to be his granddaughters. His name is John Dykes. And he said, I lived here. I thought the guy was crazy. She thought he was crazy, but she said, you better talk to him. He said, he lives here. He lived here. And he said, he lived here. He lived here with Jean Barrow. Jean Barrow, I said, I had to look later on, but Jean Barrow rang a bell. I said, what do you mean you lived here? He lived in the house for the whole year. Last year, when Marjorie Rawlings was alive, he and Jean Barrow lived in that house. They were the ones in the house. And he said that, and he and Jean Barrow, he was a 19-year-old undergraduate, English department, University of Florida. Jean Barrow was professor of poetry, and they had, I guess, whatever, because he showed me where they slept. They sort of shared a bed in the guest room. Marjorie's room was still Marjorie's room. That was off limits. And he said it was the most amazing experience living there with Jean Barrow. He said, Jean Barrow, and I vaguely remember this, Jean Barrow, she'd gotten him a job writing for the Herald Tribune in New York. And so who knew that after she left, once a week, Jean Barrow would sit down at Charles Rawlings' round table on the porch and pound out he was literary reviewer for Herald Tribune, writing reviews of books. And he would pound out his review every week on probably on her typewriter. Off would go to New York. He says the most amazing experience living with Jean. He was Jean's chauffeur, among other things, and he never knew where they were going. They said 2 trips to Van Hornsville to visit her there. One time he said, we're just going north somewhere. And they're heading north, they get to New York, they go to a theater, and the next thing he knows, he says 19 years old. Can you imagine this? We're sitting in the front row of the premiere of From Here to Eternity. And on the other side of me is James Jones, the author, And here's Frank Sinatra, the whole cast all around us. The world premiere of From Here to Eternity, which he had reviewed. Of course, some of you may know that is the last book that Max Perkins worked on as an editor. So, anyway, extraordinary. This man said he was at the funeral of Marjorie Rawlings in St. Augustine. He was at the burial at Antioch Cemetery. Absolutely amazing. I had no idea this man existed. This whole life of the house between 1952 and 1958, when Gene Barrow left the University of Florida, went to the University of Vermont, is just uncharted territory. The University of Florida never really took over. He just continued on for 5 years in the house. So, last visitors, I said, last time I got called in, Donna took a call, and I heard her arguing with somebody, and she finally said, Geoff, come talk to this crazy woman. She said her name is Marjorie Canaan Rawlings. She's crazy. She will not admit she's not Marjorie Canaan Rawlings. I started talking to her, and she is Marjorie Canaan Rawlings. She's Jimmy Rawlings' daughter. He named her Marjorie Canaan Rawlings. Then she got married. But she was originally Marjorie Canaan Rawlings. And a few weeks later, I'm having dinner with her and her sister Marcia at the Yearling, and telling me all about. They said their uncle Charles, their father died very young. He said the later years when they knew him, he said he was the most frightening character. He was like Winston Churchill. He was man of this immense, what do we say, gravitas. Anyway. But I sat there and I said, they cannot tell me, I wish Ann was here, I don't think she knows the answers. I said, why did your father and his brother Ray come to Island Grove in the first place? Do you know? He did not know. Had no idea. And I said, stop and think about it. If he had never come, they had never come to Island Grove, the rest of this never happens. That is the beginning. So those are some of the historical characters. And so anyway, maybe I was chosen by Marjorie Rawlings to be there. I don't know. I think I was thinking if I asked Marjorie as I left, how did I do, Marjorie? She'd probably say, I can imagine Marjorie saying, pretty good, Geoff. But as my friend Max says, there's always room for improvement. I very much want to acknowledge the extraordinary cast, I shouldn't call them cast, but the extraordinary people that worked at Marjorie Rawlings when I was there. All gone now, except for Judy Baker, all gone. Lee Townsend, Rick Mulligan, I don't want to forget anybody, Donna Wright, and who else?
Well, Gary, of course.
Who's?
Carrie.
Carrie, yes, Carrie, who was there before me. Yes. And Scott, I want to say a special, Scott continues on as I fade away. Scott continues to do extraordinary things as the president of the Friends of Marjorie Rawlings Farm. And I also want to acknowledge the Friends of Marjorie Rawlings Farm, the award-winning now, the best, yes.
We'll talk about that tomorrow at the business meeting.
All right. But officially, the best auxiliary organization in the state of Florida, so you deserve it.
No, district.
District! Oh.
That's good though, because there's some really strong ones.
All right. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's been a treat. And enjoy the rest of your conference.